And here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to You Didn't Catch That. I am your host, Noah, and my co-host, newbie for the day, Tiger Eyes 45. You didn't catch Netflix's original Tuca and Bertie?
I mean, it only came out like what, during 2020, 2019. I'm not that late to the party.
I suppose so. Which does bring us to the question, is there a reason that you didn't catch that or this that you can think of?
Yeah, I saw the trailer for it and I was like, "Oh, the show isn't for me." And then I never turned it on.
Just something about it sort of pushed you away, and I'm sure we'll get into that. Is there
Yeah.
anything just that you can name off the top of your head?
The specific comedy that was portrayed in the trailer, I can't remember what exactly it was that was like, "Oh, this is not the kind of jokes I like in TV show." But it was specifically the comedy, which I
Mm-hmm.
know I've mentioned to you. This isn't usually my sort of comedy show. So,
Well, let's see.
oh, no.
No, yes,
I know we're trying out a new format. Wouldn't the next question be why did you catch it?
yeah, yeah. Well, well, yes, that is the next one. We're trying a new format today. Just a heads up. Trying to keep things organized, fresh, put ideas in the proper place, plan it out further in advance. That's why we're about 20 minutes late to the stream. If you listen to us live,
We did practice it. We just didn't go through and do a rehearse of the opening.
it's rough, and I think that we do best when we're learning in a trial by fire. It certainly has been the only thing that we've done so far, and I'm not interested in trying anything new. That sounds scary.
That's the
So,
whole point of this
to the
show,
question,
though.
why? To the question, why did I catch that? The reason I did was because of Dan Olson's video, Tuca and Bertie Can't Make It Alone on Folding Idea channel, which is specifically springs from his extended discussion of the uh, 50 Shades franchise. And after doing like 90-minute movies, 90-minute movies, effectively, YouTube videos about each of the movies in the 50 Shades film series, he kind of, I get it's clear that he was really struck when he sat down to watch Toucan Birdie at how well Toucan Birdie as a show handled sex, sexuality, interest in dominant submissive dynamics, but also used scenes using those elements to actually tell a compelling story in ways that only a scene that involves sex and an interest in submissive and dominant dynamics could advance a story. And so I found the the video essay, quite intriguing. I was really interested in a show that was able to fit so much complex characterization and a lot of mature emotional themes into a cartoon sex scene featuring two bird people. And I thought, well, I'm gonna have to check that out, especially because it's a show, the rare adult animated cartoon show run by a woman, and starring and being about primarily two adult women. And I figured I gotta get in and see what it is. So I watched it a couple of years ago, and I quite enjoyed it. I was struck by sort of the darkness that it went into. It didn't feel like I was left sort of drained and harangued, but I did feel like I had gotten in touch with some really interesting, complex characters that were being used to get in touch with a lot of issues that were relatively broad and functionally universal, even if they didn't strictly apply to me specifically for obvious reasons. So I don't know. That's why it resonated with me.
Fair enough. So, why did you choose to share this series today?
Well, you know, I really enjoyed the series. I mean, besides certain practical reasons that it was, short enough that it didn't feel rude to add another television show to the things that we're watching for this podcast. We are watching so much TV.
We're gonna be switching it up soon. We're bringing in
we're
some
yeah,
books and
we're
comics, we swear.
schedule's gonna get a little stretched out for the TV. If you're here for the Bab Five, I apologize. That is gonna come at its own rate. It is hard to watch that show without just sitting down and both of us watching the DVDs at the same time via Discord.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, besides the certain practical reasons, I think this is a genuinely good show. And having gotten a chance to rewatch it twice as preparation for doing this podcast episode, I stand by it as being one of the best animated series that I've seen. Certainly probably the most mature animated characters that I've ever seen, and I use mature in like a genuine sense, not just like, oh, they're all swearing and there are boobs, but there is a lot of swearing and there are boobs. But in terms of like, these are fully fleshed out adult humans with complicated adult human needs and desires, wants, and this is about them coming to understand them and how they can relate to the things that they want to do and their goals in life. And I felt like it does that really well, and I feel like its world is very unique and nuanced, and I felt it. I like it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was smart, and I thought that it was worth sharing.
Fair enough. Now, for my favorite new question, part of the setup.
Yes.
What did you think my reaction to my first time watching this was going to be?
I assumed that it would be a strongly felt reaction, but I think that's just a fair default with whatever I'm going to bring to the show here. Whatever.
All of them have been positive to an extent.
So I
have a lot of strong emotions.
You're gonna have some sort of strong reaction to the content of the show. I figured that certainly as I was doing this last rewatch, I definitely felt like there'd be elements of just personal resonance with a lot of these characters' arcs, maybe even more so than with me. I specifically thought that there'd be a lot of personal resonance with Tuca to some extent. But the little that we've talked, I think that we both wound up a bit more on the Birdie side of things. Not that our dynamic really reflects their dynamic in any respect.
Fair enough.
As a pair of friends watching a show about a pair of friends, this felt like a very different sort of friendship. But so I expected, generally positive. Overall, I kind of figured that you would resonate with Tuca, think that they were funny, like think that it was a pretty spot on and exciting representation of feminism and how much patriarchy sucks for day-to-day life, being a woman in a sucky country.
That part you got 100% right. That is fucking yes.
I thought you'd like Speckle, but I guess I was wrong.
He gets all right. So most of your guess is accurate. I did have a lot of strong emotions about this show. It was mostly positive. It is that feminist show. It's so good, and it's so accurate with the portrayal of, like, different kind of women and how they feel about feminism, even though I don't think the word feminist is ever brought up once. It might have been at one of the WTUS meetings, but the WUDIS meetings, but otherwise, it's never directly addressed, but it's constantly getting addressed, and I love that.
It's so fun. I'm glad to hear that I got that off to some respect, and that we could both enjoy that to some degree.
Yeah.
So, let's start off with the first sort of broader body section. We're gonna call this "As It Happened." Today, in As It Happened, here's what happened in the show today. Toucan and Bertie is a 10-episode season of animation. All about its main characters, Tuca and Bertie. Tuca being a bit of a flighty former alcoholic who doesn't really have a job right now, does a lot of kind of loose freelance work. And Bertie, who is currently working as a data analyst for a big magazine company, but has aspirations of working as a pastry chef. Bertie and Tuca's living arrangements have recently, just as the show is getting started, swapped up. They used to be living together. Now Bertie's boyfriend, Speckle, who's an architect, because all boyfriends in rom-coms are architects. I think that's the quiet, unspoken joke.
Okay, he's no Ted Mosby. That's the dude from How I Met Your Mother, right? That's the guy?
I don't know. I never watched the show. My mental picture of an architect in a rom-com is Tom Hanks in I don't know, one of the rom-coms Tom Hanks was in, probably a number of them.
Yeah, okay, that's his name. Sweet. Just want to make sure.
So Tuca's got to move out to her own apartment, and that sort of is the beginning of a kickoff of a whole season of sort of, among other things, sort of reflecting on their relationship with each other, what what their each own individual needs are, what they want out of their own lives, and eventually also, what does Speckle want? How can the relationship between he and Bertie work? How can the relationship between Tuca and her family continue to work? And it's just a big season of reevaluation, discovering past traumas, realizing what you can do, what you ought to do, what you want to do, but what has been holding you back from doing to uplift others and yourself. And ends with the realization, among other things, Tuca reaching out to family, stepping away from a kind of abusive financial relationship with her auntie, and Bertie and Speckle realizing that their goals in life right now are just incompatible, and that their relationship might need to end, as Speckle realizes that he kind of wants to reach out for permanency and a long-term plan and buy a house. And Bertie realizes that she's not really prepared for that kind of commitment, and instead wants to pursue sort of her personal career goals, which include starting up her own patisserie, uh, which which sounds like a very grounded and boring show, but I assure you that any given episode of this is weirder than most hallucinations and fever dreams that you've had recently.
It is far weirder than what he's making it sound. It is a show for full of magical realism for a magical realist.
That does bring us to the next section here, which we're going to call Me's on Stuff. As we discuss the broader world and just about everything that isn't the characters in the show.
Apparently, it's some, like, theater, what is it?
It's a film theory joke.
It's a film theory joke. I didn't study film theory. I study, like, theories that affect anthropology, sociology, like critical race theory and stuff. That's where I usually go.
Gotta get into the
feminism, stuff like that. That's what I study. So I don't know any of these terms.
So let's talk about this, because I think we both have kind of it's interesting. I keep wanting to describe the world as being very surreal and cartoony, and you keep kind of going to a magical realism. And I think that those are two very different interpretations of what's going on in the world, and I'd like to dig down into that one a bit more.
Well, I think it depends on what your definition of surrealism is, because if you just go with basic definitions, the two aren't wholly disconnected. They can work together to create one world. So, what would you count as your definition of surrealism in this TV series?
I guess I just mean that the elements of the world are a lot more expressive. They're less interested in, like, reality as it's defined by physics and what can and can't happen. There's a lot more emotions and just feelings and complexity being expressed in real world, in other objects and how things are playing out. I mean, it's not just bird people, it's all sorts of animal people, and also sometimes humans and plants occasionally. Just anything goes. So long as it's wearing clothes, it's probably a fully, sentient human being, or a person, being in this case, if it just feels sort of right. And also sometimes just smaller objects will gain full sentience, and it's just sort of gonna happen, and it's just a thing that's happening, and people go with the flow. Sometimes sex bugs are fully sentient bugs that grow to be 6 feet tall and terrorize a mini mart. Sometimes a boob is just gonna pop off of a chest, grow a face, and be, no, I'm done hanging around all this sexual harassment, I'm leaving, this is too gross, I'm gone.
And you see, what all of the one thing that connects all of that, which is why I consider it to be magical realism, is the fact that all of the characters act as if this is normal. This is just their natural state. This is just how the world around them is. Mm-hmm. And magical realism is anytime there's a magical element introduced into a story and everybody acts as if it's normal. It's not out of place there. It's just how things are. A good example of that would be Amy Bender has a collection of short stories titled Willful Creatures, and I believe I read a lot of Amy Bender's works because she's big on magical realism. Mm-hmm. And I cannot remember the title of this short story, but it might have been Willful Creatures in and of itself. But that's the title of the collection that the story is in. And it's basically two animals sitting down talking about war and how one of them's a veteran who has been to war and the other one has never been, but has all these ideas about what war actually is. And they just sit down and have an emotional talk about it. And the only thing that's strange to an outsider is that they're animals talking about it, whereas in the story, that's perfectly natural. So I feel like a lot of this world's laws just fall under magical realism. It's just how things are. You don't question it, and the characters certainly never do. Especially when, like, Grandma Ghost comes back after being baked into a cake. The story is strange but consistent. It is so strange, but it's consistent.
Earlier. Let's see here. I have a quote from you. I believe it was effing weird but consistent.
Oh, it is fucking weird. The whole show is fucking weird. Grandma Ashes.
It's funny.
Grandma Ashes and the walking boob nearly turned me off. I almost did not finish the series. But like all the good stuff comes later on. You just gotta get through those first 3.
I'm surprised that those turned you off so much. I thought that they were just, oh man, that's bizarre, creepy, and funny.
Well, like I said, this isn't my usual kind of comedy. I don't really enjoy gross comedy or low-reaching fruit. Mm-hmm. If it's something really simple and easy and not really thought about and doesn't make me think, I don't particularly like putting a lot of time into it. And like, that's not me trying to be elitist. It's just I genuinely just don't really get any enjoyment out of that. I don't like gross jokes. Mm-hmm. And I don't really like. I mean, you know me. I'm a demisexual mess who doesn't even know how to really have a conversation about sex, despite having an open mother about it. Like, and this show is a lot about that. A lot of the comedy comes from that. A lot of
sex in this show.
So it's just kind of, it's a clash of taste right off the bat, but the emotions and the story that they're telling is so interesting. It keeps you in. It was enough to keep me in and keep me going. But like a lot of the characters creep me out, and the jokes just weren't there for me at the very start.
It's funny that I've always defined magical realism as being a story that is otherwise thoroughly grounded in reality, except for like one or two elements that don't really get questioned or but are still kind of extraordinary potentially. Like the example that my brain thinks of is What Women Want, which is just a movie where it's just a normal movie, and then a guy randomly gets the ability to hear the thoughts of women specifically, and just what happens when he has the power to do that and listen to women specifically. And it's an extraordinary power, but it's never like really fully explained how it happens or how it functions. It's just a thing that happens, and here's the rest of the grounded rom-com story that we're going to attach to that sort of singular happenstance.
I mean,
the truth of the matter is,
those two definitions aren't like completely separated. They can both be magical realism. I feel like a lot of the story is grounded in reality. There's just half of it's magic and half of it's really realistic.
Mm-hmm. I guess I just wonder if like, because with that sort of definition of magical realism, it seems like any story, well, most stories with magic kind of fit that. Because I mean, like Harry Potter and Aragon and most fantasy, it's all like magic is real and it's a part of the world and it's just sort of accepted as an element of it.
Except for the fact that in Harry Potter, there are characters who question magic and do not believe magic is actually magic. They try and prove it as other things. Harry, when he first learns about it, doesn't really believe it until he sees it even. So I think having characters question the existence of it is what separates magical realism from stories with magic in it. If your characters don't question it, and Tuca and Bertie do not question anything that happens, then, well, anything upon the weird side, stuff that is perceived weird to us.
Yeah.
They do not question that stuff. I think that's what really sets it, like, entrenches it in magical realism, versus Aragorn is not based on the real world. Not Aragorn. Yeah, Aragon is not based on the real world, so it's a fantasy story. And Harry Potter's fantasy, because characters do question it, it is not super realistic. It goes straight deep dive into magic while having characters doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird to the characters to see different things. Like the Threstles.
I'm really sorry that you sort of bounced off so hard, because I think that this is a very funny show with a very funny kind of gross tone that I think matches kind of the weird anxiety of it. Like, the world is kind of weird, gross, and anxiety inducing, and here's a bunch of jokes that are kind of weird, gross, and anxiety inducing, but also cute and funny. Grandma got baked into a cake, and now she needs Speckle to eat her so she can go to the afterlife. That
sounded so... Okay, so that gave me anxiety. Like, a lot of the stuff that happens in the real world does not make me super anxious. I have learned how to cope and live in the world that we exist in. However, this show made me anxious with some of its shit. Like, with some of its jokes and situations and scenarios, and just, oh man.
You're saying that you don't want to live in the world where
no.
accidentally mixing products can result in 6-foot-tall sex bugs.
Yeah, nope, I'm good. I am good. Like, I would choose to live in most fantasy worlds. Not this one. Not this one at all. It seems like it has all the problems of our world and more.
Giant crabs and jelly lakes is just maybe not the right world for you.
No, it is not.
That jelly lake, that's definitely a drowning hazard.
Alright, so
the
we do have to start moving on here, but the music did rock.
The music is a bop. The songs are bops.
The musicals were so good.
Of pop music,
like the musical moments
of show tunes.
Yeah.
The end music, it's a lot of like lo-fi classics that really match the ending theme of the episode. I love in particular like how 8, which is sort of the all hope is lost moment of the season, where like Bertie and Tuca get into a car and just drive out of town because they both have had really rough nights and they don't know where to go back and they don't know how to go forward, so they're just going out. And it ends on this really sad lo-fi music, and then the end of episode 9, when they get their act together and feel ready to go back and conquer things, it's energy that's just a bit more pepped up in the lo-fi music. It's just tasty. And the remixes that use the dialogue, ooh.
You really do enjoy lo-fi music.
It's so good. So, you're right. Moving on. We got to move on. We've got Raving Character Corner. An area, a category that needs no explanation, I would argue. And first up in the Character Corner, we do have Tuca.
Yes.
The eponymous Tuca.
Yes. And we haven't really talked a lot about her, but let's do it. Okay, so Tuca, to summarize, is a grown woman who has been 6 months sober. She hasn't had anything to drink in 6 months. This is like the first time and longest time she's been sober since she's been an adult. She's also having a dry spell, sex-wise, so she hasn't had a lot of sex lately. And she is trying to get her shit together because her best friend needed her to move out so her boyfriend, Speckle, could move in. And Tuca is dealing with living in an apartment on her own for the first time, probably in her entire life, though we are not explicitly told that, because it seems like the two of them have been together since college. At the very least. And she's trying to become an adult, but she gets distracted a lot. Like, I really do believe she has ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
It's never confirmed in the series, but I feel like it is heavily implied. Because she has moments where she hyperfixates on things, and then she has moments where even though she needs the focus, she just can't at all, and there are so many other things she finds interesting that she just doesn't have the same passions as before, and it just switches quickly for her. And I know I'm being really generalistic, Like I said, that's just the stuff I noticed right away about
Oh yeah.
Tuca's ADHD. There are of course other signs, and everybody's ADHD is different, but like that's the stuff that's most prominent in my little brother's and my mom's ADD. So that's the stuff I always pick on in, with characters with ADHD the most.
That's really interesting. I hadn't picked up on that, but that makes a lot of sense. She
Yeah.
does. Yeah, focus is clearly, you know, a struggle, and of course, with a lot more complexity and internal issues that come with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Drink arrived.
No worries. But again, not everybody's symptoms are the same, and it could be that she wasn't meant to be ADHD at all, but like I said, that's just what I assumed from the fact that I've seen a lot of the same stuff happen in my two little brothers who have ADHD.
Yeah, and she's so she's she's a source of just a lot of the humor in the show. She's just a real
Yes.
bright moment. She is like confident and loud, and she does a lot of impromptu singing and dancing and taking her top off in uncomfortable moments.
Yeah. Where she
I
if she
think that I
doesn't know what to
remember.
do, it's coming off.
That's sort of remember reading on Twitter, and it was an insight that obviously I wasn't going to get being a person without. But I remember reading on Twitter the discourse around the show. You know, some women were talking like, "Yeah, it's the only show I've seen that gets like the reason that you take your top off is because you want to distract people and not be the center of attention," which struck me as like,
They aren't gonna
uh,
think about what you're saying if you're showing some flesh. Especially that
yeah,
specific area of flesh.
that was something that would never have occurred to me. The idea of like, for obvious reason, just the idea of drawing attention to like your body as a way to distract people from yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which makes makes a lot of sense in this show that is spends a lot of time talking about body and attention to women's bodies. And
No one remembers what the girls in Girls Gone Wild ever said. Come on. I'm assuming I've never seen that. I've just heard about it. I've
I
never
thought
heard
that was
anyone quote
I think
that, so.
yeah, not many motivational quotes coming out of the Girls Gone Wild side of the cinematic world. um her whole arc with Tuca, it's not as front and center like Birdie. I mean, not to say that there aren't elements happening it that aren't happen. It's not happening front and center. There are a lot of conventional elements of it. Are a lot of it grounded on lifelong issues or things that happened in her past that we didn't really get to see, like her becoming sober, like her having, the like one terrible night that kind of led to her having to be sober. That ended up, we find out, with her being hospitalized and needing Birdie to come and literally save her life. Um, and also like her history with her family and the complex relationship between her mother, who had a lot of kids and not a lot of money, and her aunt, who had a lot of money and not a lot of family.
I can see why you thought I would relate to her character the most. Um,
Sometimes you make the easy guess, and sometimes you're dead wrong.
it's there's a lot going on with Tuca, and I think the reason why her issues aren't as loud and forefront as Birdie's are is because Tuca, for as loud as she is, it all seems kind of performative. She has to be the loud
Mm-hmm.
one because that's how she gets
Yeah.
attention. She has to be the fun and distracting one because that's how she keeps people around without them realizing her
Yeah.
issues. It's all completely performative, and the moment you meet her aunt, you realize why. Because in that episode
Yeah.
is when you find out that Tuca feels disconnected from her four other siblings because she feels as if after their mom died, they stopped talking to her and didn't want her around.
Yeah.
And it looked as if she was the youngest in the flashback, though that is not 100% confirmed. And if you're the youngest after you just suffered a loss from a parent and the only other adult around does not think highly of your mother at all, and the other
Mm-hmm.
kids want to get out of there quickly because of that or any other number of reasons that is going on with her Aunt Tallulah, I understand why she feels as if she has been abandoned and isolated from the rest of her family, and why she keeps up the performances to keep her aunt around.
Yeah. and we find out that her aunt liked her, considered her kind of the favorite, presumably because she is willing to play the game, to take the ribbing, to get the verbal abuse, to deal with it when her aunt gets super drunk and starts saying genuinely hurtful, mean, heinous things about her and her mother.
Yeah.
And and sort of the whole point of the episode at the end, after a day of like an evening of partying with her mom, with her auntie, she realizes, because for the first time she's hanging out and partying, but she's not drinking. She's disguising it. She went with Speckle, and Speckle is getting all of her drinks secretly.
Speckle is drinking for 2 people that night, and oh man, he is not handling it well.
He can't handle it. The poor boy, this poor wholesome man, who, like, even when he's super inebriated, is listening to the horrible things that her aunt is saying. Is like, you can't let her talk to you like that. And
he's always the emotional rock.
Realizes, sober for the first time, dealing with this. No, I can't. You can't talk about my mom like that. And you know what? This has to change. And she throws the check that her aunt writes for her back in her face. I'm not going to be your financial dependent anymore. I'm not going to do the exchange.
It's also, we have to get to Bertie soon, but I do also want to mention how it feels like the best quote to summarize her relationship with her aunt comes from when Speckle is reading a magazine on the wall about how her aunt Tallulah shattered the glass ceiling and left the shards all around for other women to, what was it, crawl through or walk through?
Left the shards a bloody mess for other women to crawl through.
Yep. And that's exactly what Aunt Tallulah does. She puts down everybody around her who has not done as well as her, because she feels like since she's helping them, their lives should be easy enough to reach her level of achievement, if not higher. And the moment they haven't done that is when she starts tearing them down, is what it's applied. Though I kind of wonder if maybe the verbal abuse has always been there, and maybe if that's a way Aunt Tallulah saw to motivate people, and instead it just made them feel shitty. Because we find out that Tuca's mom didn't accept the money that Tuca was accepting for years, and that is the one regard Tallulah thinks Tuca is smarter than her mother in, because she thinks her mother should have always accepted the money as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a big motif in the actually, one second here. Kitty wanted out.
You gotta give in to their wills.
The cats what they want.
Yeah.
So
unless it's in this room, because then they're not getting it.
In the show, especially just in terms of its approach to, it doesn't say feminism, but in its approach to feminism, this show, like, one of the biggest motifs, and we'll get to in Did You Mean That, our new category about theme and motif and broader stuff. But we'll get there. But like the one unifying theme between what I would argue are like the two halves of the show, which is about a lot of things, I feel like can be divided into two big halves. The one sort of unifying element between those two halves is, you've got to uplift others when you can. And in terms of, like, the real world, women need to uplift others and take care of each other and help them get through and past patriarchal barriers. Tallulah is like the absolute worst.
Oh yeah.
She's just the worst.
And she feels like she's doing all of it for all women around the world.
And she's definitely of that mind of like, and then you're going to do exactly what I did to be a success, because otherwise you're just a failure, if you can't deal with all of it like I did.
Though there is a moment at the very end where she's clearly projecting her issues onto Tuca, and I wonder how much of Tuca's abandonment issues come from her and her experiences, and how much of it comes from Aunt Tallulah's experiences. And this is not to put Tuca down whatsoever, or to say her issues do not come from herself, because they clearly do have some personal connections to what has happened in her past. But I'm wondering how much of that was projected onto her from Aunt Tallulah and increased her already existing abandonment issues. Because the final thing she says to her is how you're a failure, and because you're a failure, everyone's going to leave you, and no one's ever going to want to stay around you because you can't get your shit together. And I'm summarizing, but that's basically what Aunt Tallulah said.
Yeah. And in this like very scene, we see like Tuca walking away from a massive empty room where Tallulah is sitting alone in the dark at an end of a long table with no one else around. And it's like, oh, you have nobody, Tallulah.
You're a success, but you pushed everyone else away because they weren't as successful as you.
Yep. And that makes a lot of sense to me, that's sort of like, oh, it's projection and connection. And it wouldn't help to be someone who clear, like Tuca mentions that she wants a big family, just a massive family and a bunch of friends. She wants to be around people because she grew up in a big family and she's used to having a lot of those connections. And to grow up in the shadow of a woman who has nothing.
I also want to add something to that. I don't think Tuca just wants a big family because she had one. I think Tuca wants a big family because she remembers the presence of one. But once her mom died when she was super young, she was the youngest, so she had to live with Aunt Tallulah the longest. So she lost all of them. And I wonder if she never felt loved enough from her family, and she wants to replace that love with love from children who oftentimes, and this is not the healthiest thing, but oftentimes there are people who want to have kids because they feel as if they weren't loved by their own families enough, and children have to love their parents. And I kind of wonder how much of that is playing into Tuca's mindset, because her Aunt Tallulah caused her as much as her mother's accident for her to lose all of her siblings, and as much as for her own choices as well that we get later on in the series. She's the one who doesn't choose to call, but waits on her family to call her, because she feels like if they want her around, they will make an effort to include her. And she doesn't realize she has to make an effort too, even though she was the youngest.
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially her sense of kind of, at least until the end of the season, the sense of kind of trapped passivity in relation to like her connection with her family. But I also think that because these and these characters are so big and they're
so complicated. I love it.
And I love how we can have these discussions, and I don't feel like we have to do as much reading between the lines and trying to capture the tiny bits of complex humanity that are going to get thrown away by whatever nonsense the writers are going to throw out next season. This is writing by people that care about people and actors that care about their characters, and complex stories about full complex humans that merits this sort of dissection. And that's why I like this show so much. And I think that's why it works so well as a basis for an episode. It can take it in a way that a lot of the other stuff we talk about just can't.
It can take it. Oh, sorry.
It is fun to look at it because it can take it, and it is always revealing exciting stuff. And I think there's another element of Tuca's character that I think also is part of like why she wants a family, is because she loves her mom so much. Like, even though she's passed away, even though it's been years, she is still the idea of her mom is still strong in her mind, and is still kind of, I think, central to her idea of family and to who kind of what she wants to be like, despite growing up with Tallulah, who is the worst and who hates her mom, and like maybe was quietly jealous of her mom for having that sort of all those grounding and connections. That may be more inference than anything else, but definitely I feel like Tuca sees being someone like her mom as sort of her own personal image of success and proper adulthood. And her mom was someone who had a large family and who raised kids and who she feels made a lot of sacrifices to do it well.
And even when Tuca's talking about her childhood, even though bad stuff happens, it's not the bad stuff that her memories focus on, it's all the good stuff. I want to add to a couple things you said, and then we can move on to Bertie. But real quick, I don't think it's fair to call Aunt Tallulah the worst, simply because we've seen all the characters in the show are complicated, except for one who's very clearly supposed to be, this person shit, fuck this person. But everyone else has complexity, and I feel like it's unfair to Tallulah's character to just write her off completely right now, when we haven't really gotten a lot with her. We got one episode with her, and I didn't even like Tuca and Bertie after one episode, so I feel like we need to keep more of an open mind on her character and see where her patterns of abuse come from, and if she can grow past them so she can get close to her nieces and nephews who are still around and still live even though her sister is no longer there.
Definitely.
Family's complicated, and if you want to separate yourself from abusive family members, do so. No one can tell you you can't. But it's very clear that Tallulah and her older sister Terry still care. It's very clear that Tuca and her older sister Terry still care about Tallulah, because they're the two willing to go visit her while she's in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's that. And also, the show can take all the punches we throw at it, even though we're not, like, throwing any, like, really heavy, this show is awful punches. But we can have dissection, character analysis, and cross-examining our different ideas without, like, either one of us having to be proven totally wrong. Because the characters are so complex, it could be everything and nothing all together, because we don't know the whole picture yet. And that's really great. And that is a big thing when it comes to Birdie. And this next section that we're going to be discussing on Birdie is going to have a huge content warning, because Birdie's character arc throughout the series definitely touches on feminism just as loudly as Tuca's does, if not more so, simply because it does with a lot of subjects such as sexual harassment at the workplace, and child abuse. And while we talked about verbal abuse with Tuca, there's a different sort of child abuse that plays into Birdie and her fears here. So this is just a huge content warning. If you don't want to listen to this now, when I edit this video for YouTube, I will put stamps so you can skip ahead to the next character dissection later. But
and if you're listening to this as a podcast, we will be done talking about Birdie in the next 10 minutes. And if I have to go back and put in a new time, I will, just while I'm editing. Just know that if you don't want to listen to stuff that, discussion of this sort of, deeper, heavier topic and subject matter, you can just skip ahead another 10 minutes, and we'll be done with it. And we are going to move on to some of the other characters. But if you feel comfortable approaching some tougher subject matter, I think you'll find that this show has a lot of really interesting and worthwhile character stuff to author. But if it's upsetting, definitely don't hang around for our discussion of the Bird Show.
Yeah.
And go on to the next fun part of our discussion of the Bird Show.
Still listen to the rest of the discussion on the Bird Show, just not the Birdie part.
Leave a review, comment, and subscribe.
Okay, but on a serious note, I like Birdie. Tuca's definitely my favorite, but Birdie is the character I relate to more. If that makes sense. Sometimes the characters you relate to more are not the ones you like best. It's just how it goes sometimes. But her entire arc straight from the get-go, and this is part of the reason why I didn't like Speckle. I thought it was going to be about her dealing with an abusive boyfriend, because in the first episode, Speckle's kind of pushy about getting Tuca's box out of the apartment. It's her last box full of stuff, and it's just taking up a little bit of space right next to the couch. It didn't seem like that big of a deal for me. I didn't understand why he was so pushy about Tuca getting her shit out of there. So I thought Birdie's whole arc was going to be dealing with an abusive boyfriend and learning how she can live on her own just like Tuca can. Oh my gosh! Nope, Speckle's actually pretty decent. He was just kind of weird those first 2 episodes. And, she has so much other abuse to deal with. And it sucks.
Yes, yeah.
One of the first big episodes for her is when she's dealing with Dirk in the workplace, and he's a rooster, and I can't help but wonder if he was made specifically a rooster to make fun of, like, other roosters in cartoon media. But,
I thought it was just wordplay.
It could just be wordplay. That is completely possible, but a lot of his loud personality feels like, like Warner Brothers character level to me. So I wasn't sure how much of that was wordplay and how much of that was, oh, hey, remember this other rooster in the show who kind of flirted with women randomly too? Yeah, we're calling back to that. Either way, her first, like, big episode, aside from Tuca moving out and her learning to live without Tuca, is, dealing with workplace harassment, because Dirk is gross. Mm-hmm. Dirk is gross, and he's a creep, and he is going around saying a bunch of inappropriate things to the women, and, I believe, didn't he touch, Bertie's boob? Again, without her consent?
I'm not sure if he touched her boob without her consent. He definitely started commenting about it and how tight her shirt was, and how, the boss will give you anything wearing a shirt like that. And in, like, a meeting, it's not sexual harassment, but he's also, like, stealing her notes and, like, her ideas and taking all the credit for her, like, actual work.
So
like, he's doing the horribles in every respect in corner of her daily work life.
Yeah. So it's not doing anything physical to her, but it's all really gross shit, nevertheless. And she goes to try and report it to HR. And HR doesn't want to do anything about it because that can cause problems within the workplace. And she has to... Tuca ends up arriving to help her out. And, it gets brought up during a work meeting. And then all the other women comment about how Dirk's comments make them uncomfortable as well. And how he's really gross. And how they're all having problems with him. And HR has told them all pretty much the same thing, which is, hey, this is just a guy being a guy and it's not a big deal. But it very clearly is. And again, this is that feminist show where everyone's going to say, yes, it is, besides the people in power who don't want it to be a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then after it comes out that he's been harassing all these people, his behavior changes a little bit, but also he gets embarrassed in a work meeting where Bertie gets to say her ideas before he can take them. Mm-hmm. And she gets to shine, and then they ask for his opinion. He has nothing, because Bertie already said all her ideas, so he couldn't steal anything.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like his kermuppets of the episode. And I kind of thought that was going to be a one-off thing. I thought oh, here's their obligatory workplace harassment episode because this show is catered to women. So they're going to have it in there and they're probably not going to do anything else with it. But the show is nothing if not consistent. And it does not get forgotten about. And I really appreciate that. I'm really used to shows doing like obligatory, here's our women's issue episode. Now we're going to go back to all of our other comedies. But this show never stops addressing women's issues without, like, throwing them in your face and reminding you how bad people are. Like, they can have serious moments and remind you, hey, shitty people like this exist, without making you feel bad for not always thinking about it. Because even Bertie and Tuca don't want to always be thinking about this heavy shit. That's the source of that's the source of Bertie's anxiety, because, as we find out, she's experienced abuse in her childhood, and it's never stated what exactly happened, but it's very clearly applied to be sexual abuse that an adult sent her way when she was 12 years old. And while it's never discussed where all of her anxiety issues come from, it's very clearly that a lot of her uncomfortability around men specifically comes from that. Even when a maintenance guy comes and starts working around the house, he's making small chat with her, and his small chat is creepy as hell, sends off a bunch of red flags. I would not want that person to have a key to my apartment. Hell no.
Worst superintendent ever.
Worst ever. No. But, that sends her on a walk to get air and space so she doesn't have to be around the creepy guy. And then, it's a whole episode about how she wanted to dress up and look good for herself, and all these people around her kept complimenting her and sexually harassing her and verbally harassing her while she's just trying to go for a fucking walk. And again, a lot of Bertie's arc is dealing with the different kind of harassment she faces in her day-to-day life. And it doesn't, while it constantly reminds you this is what women go through, it doesn't make you feel shit for not thinking about it always. And I know I already said that, but I really want to reiterate that, because a lot of serious series that cover these topics either make you feel guilty for not always thinking about what can women be doing to help other women better, what can men be doing to help women better and feel safer, where it's like, we don't want to always think about this stuff because it can bring down our mental health, and it brings Birdie's down. She ends up dressing completely differently for her second job, which is an apprenticeship she has at a bakery under an older man who is a chef. I don't remember his name. His name is not worth remembering as far as I'm concerned. And that was probably a smart idea, because she was going to dress up really nice in a really nice outfit for it. Not in a sexual outfit, but a really nice one. And I feel like it only would have made this guy creeper towards her. Because immediately the weird sexual situations start happening at her other job. The bakery one. And right off the bat, as soon as I met this guy, I'm like, this guy's a creep. I don't know what it is about him. He's a fucking asshole, and I don't like him. He's making me uncomfortable. And it only kept getting worse, and it's not until... For some people, it's going to be the episode where he holds her over a pot to smell food finishing. And it's clearly supposed to be sexual, but I wasn't sure if I was reading too much into the situation, or if that is what the show was actually trying to do. Because I find I read into a lot of sexual situations in TV to be really creepy and power play in like a really weird way. But I don't know. Maybe that's just because I'm on the asexual spectrum and all that shit seems kind of weird to me. But this show makes it clear later on that, hey, yes, that was supposed to be creepy. He's being a creep right here. And I appreciate it coming back to that and actually addressing it instead of it just saying, leaving it up to interpretation. Because again, as a woman, I was confused about what the intent of that original scene was.
Yeah.
But,
definitely,
I know I've gone on and off on her a lot. I'm sorry. Feel free.
in my first reading, like, a viewing of that episode, and in these rewatches, that is definitely a scene that gets really, like, from the perspective of someone, it definitely felt a lot more, yeah. As a moment, it seemed like it was very clearly, specifically designed to be a lot of things at once. Above all, intense. You know, it is a scene where he is putting
definitely
her in a
feels
position
intense.
of, like, danger, clearly forcing her against her will, taking control of her body in a way that is scary and surprising. Because up till now, he was kind of a creep, but he was a creep that was like still teaching her stuff, and you were kind of willing to just like kind of flow with it. She didn't seem in immediate danger. Suddenly, oh my gosh. Not only is she like in danger of getting burned, this man has bigger than her and could do like whatever, and he's like clearly doing this because he seems to be getting off on like being in charge and putting her in danger and her being stuck like this. And Birdie just breaks free and runs off after this really quick, fastly edited moment here that is designed to like build up the tension. And I think it's sort of emblematic of like the bigness and complexity and like multi-dimensionality of the characters, that immediately after getting herself out of the scene and getting herself into a bathroom just for safety, for isolation, to be removed from all this pressure and extreme feelings, she
masturbates. She masturbates. Yeah.
She's just got so much intense feeling, and it has awakened a lot in her that is, you know, a lot of stuff that is resembles things that we realize are kind of connected to her own personal sexual fantasies, but also is harassment and abuse and connects to her trauma. And it's all so much, and that's how she ends up releasing it, and it leaves you with this horrible feeling of ambiguity. Like, that was a terrible moment. How do you feel about this man? How do you want to continue this relationship? How are you going to respond to this? It's all big and horrible
and
human.
And once again, Tuca comes in clutch when Birdie later tells her about the whole situation, including what happened in the bathroom after. And Tuca's like, yeah, that's not your fault. He's a fucking creep for doing that. So what if you did that? That doesn't matter. He's gross for doing that. And I think out of everybody,
100% agree.
Tuca understands turning to sexual release to get over bad situations.
Mm-hmm.
Because
not that she seems to be able to do so now that she's sober, but that's her own whole episode.
that is literally something she brings up about how much more difficult it is to be sober now and going on dates, because before she could just get drunk and just use sex to get past the bad gritty parts. And like, I mean, like nitty gritty, like an awkward date and whatnot.
And Tuca's role in Bertie's life, if we can just sort of talk about like their two relationship, which is of course the literal title of the show. Tuca is there, to keep going this sort of recurring motif of the idea of uplifting others, because Tuca messes up a lot and is kind of a mess because she is in a bit of a messy spot right now and is having trouble figuring things out. But so is Bertie. But Tuca is repeatedly shown to be, because of her confidence, because of her ability to engage performatively and socially with others, able to come in and really help uplift Bertie when she needs to. She is the one that's responsible for helping Bertie to like start, confront the sexual harassment in her workplace and obtain the job and get the promotion that she wants. She's sort of yes.
I was just gonna add that she's also the one who helps Bertie get over her anxiety issues by taking her out to the store. And while there are issues with the two pushing against each other's personal boundaries, it never feels like it's in a way that's unhealthy. It always feels like it's in a way that's necessary for the other person to grow. So I just want to throw that out there. There is issues with their dynamic, but it never once feels abusive, in my opinion, even when they're fighting and going at each other's throats with like verbal complaints of one another.
That is sort of the big struggle between them, it feels like, ultimately, because they both they want to be there and help each other and uplift each other when they can, but like sort of Bertie says in their kind of in an episode towards the end of the season where it feels like it's becoming too much for them, where Tuca's especially messed up, like gone off, and I think this is the episode where she goes off and buys a Jaguar, like the animal, not the car.
A forever friend.
And she there are a lot of unpleasant consequences of buying a Jaguar, and it ends, I think, with Bertie looking at Tuca and be like, it's too much work. This relationship it has become work, and you might need to take a break.
That's actually the next episode, which is the one where she goes to the hospital when a stranger drives 7 miles to take her to the hospital because she refused to ask Bertie because she didn't want to be a burden to Bertie. And Bertie's like, I literally offered 100 times before I got busy with my baking stuff. I wanted to take you there, and I had to find out from Speckle that you were in the hospital, and you didn't even tell him. He found out from a stranger on the internet who contacted him through an online, like, sex thing that Tuca was doing for work, and Speckle did not realize what it was. He thought it was a video game. I don't know how much of that was actual his ignorance or how much of that was willful ignorance, but whatever, the point is, she did not find out from Tuca.
Yeah. And the end of it being just like this sense of like, I want to help you. You won't let me help you, and the ways that I've tried to help you and the ways that you don't realize that I'm all adding up to be too much. And it's sort of such a big core of the show is just this element of like, you want to help the people in your life and you want to be helped by the people in your life, but certainly there's a question and examination of the things that you need to help and protect them from, but there's also, when it comes to Tuca and Bertie's relationship, the big question is, how much can you give? How much can you be expected to give? And at what point do you just have to look at a person and say, you need to fix yourself before we can continue, or at least you need to figure out what you want and start working towards that on your own path because what you're asking from me is too much, what I'm giving with you is too much, and we need to re-examine our dynamic.
Basically, the whole question about their relationship is, what are the boundaries? Which is really the whole question about the entire show and everybody's relationships with everyone else. What are the boundaries? And I think that's a good point to move into Speckle, because he does have to set some boundaries for Birdie when Birdie's not automatically meeting all of his needs.
Yes, and that is definitely, like, you were saying a thing in our kind of, I think this was in sort of our pre-gaming planning that I think was really, that I found really interesting, was the idea that Speckle's needs and personalities wants are kind of downplayed in the series. They're not sort of the central focus for most of the season, but they are there. They are very clearly there. His wants and needs and his ideas and inspirations, what he wants with his personal life, with they are clear and they are spoken and reiterated, and he is a consistent character, because this show is nothing if not consistent. And the problem is that they get downplayed because Birdie and Tuca don't care or pay attention. There was that quote that you brought up. That's so great.
Don't talk about me while I'm not here, Speckle says as he leaves to go get dressed, and Tuca just nonchalantly reminds him, don't worry, we never do. And that's literally the whole series. That's his relationship with both of them the entire series. Even in, like, the first episode, while I was creeped out by him, a lot of that is him very clearly stating what his boundaries are. He wants Tuca's stuff out of there, so he feels like it's just him and his girlfriend, because Tuca's been invading his personal boundaries a lot throughout the course of the beginning of the relationship. He wants one thing up on the wall, which is a photo of himself, and very weird, but that's the only thing he wants of his that's up on the wall, so the apartment feels like his. He's very clearly communicating all of this, and he continuously tries to communicate his needs, but they don't get through to Birdie a lot. Even with, like, the picture thing, Birdie argues because it's weird to have a picture of yourself on the wall, and he has to remind her, yeah, but nothing else in this apartment is mine, except for the sugar thing with his grandma's ashes in it and the wall painting. And the sugar immediately gets given to Tuca, disrespecting his boundaries right off the bat.
It's yeah, and that is a microcosm of how it plays out, because we have this whole series and we have this whole season and arc dealing with Tuca's issues with her boundaries and her goals and how she's gonna reshape and figure out what she wants, and Birdie with her goals and complexities with her broader desires and her issues with her sexuality and past trauma, and all of that has to get resolved. And towards the end of the season, the two vanish. Like I said, they just get in a car and they drive out of town and they vanish for days on end. And, like, she contacts Speckle a couple of times on her phone, and then she loses her phone in a jelly lake, and he gets nothing. They have no way to contact her because Tuca doesn't have his number. And so she comes back, and Speckle, who up until now has been, like, the token goodish guy, like the one man that isn't the worst, that doesn't...
He has not been abusive in any way whatsoever, and the only other person that's kind of like that is the deli guy Tuca goes on a date with. And he just wants to go on a date.
Yeah. He
doesn't get a lot.
To Birdie. He wants to have a nice house. He has aspirations of a long-term relationship. He wants to support her whenever he can. And though there are times he doesn't understand what she wants or needs, he still wants to give it to her and wants to understand her and is willing to go out of his comfort zone to try and understand her and give her what excites her and makes her happy. But at the end of the season, on the final episode, he just melts down. He tells her flat out, I can't do this anymore. Sometimes I need you to be my rock. You can't just vanish. Because in this, like, moment of, like, confusion and terror when she was gone, he, like, acted upon, like, a fantasy that they both, like, been looking into and they'd been heavily considering. But Birdie had sort of backed out on, because she had trouble saying this because she was terrified kind of this broader... the commitment involved in buying a house, this thing that they had been pursuing. And Speckle, in, like, the panic while she was gone, bought a terrible fixer-upper house because that's what he wants, because that is his core need. He wants to move towards permanence and commitment and a long-term life. And he, is realizing maybe Birdie isn't a part of that because she's never been there. She's not been giving back to him the support that he would like in this endeavor, and that's sort of the big confrontation that they have to have. Is this something that they're gonna be able to work together on as a partnership?
So I do think it's important to note how by the end of the series, Speckle is living in the fixer-upper house, which doesn't have a roof or a bathroom or anything. But he and Birdie still kiss at the end of Christmas,
Yep.
right before, while they're delivering treats. They still talk about wanting to make the relationship work. So they're not technically broken up, but they are on an official break where they're not seeing other people, but they have some space from each other, which is something they explicitly stated in the series. So the relationship isn't over completely, and I'm really interested to see if Birdie's going to be able to meet his needs, because so far it feels like it's all been one-sided with him only working on hers, even learning what, like, her pre-panic stuff is. Right before she goes into the panic attack, she has some, like, down spiral moments that he's learned to recognize to be able to support her. And that, A+ boyfriending, A+ partner, like, he doesn't always get what he needs to do right, but he's trying. And honestly, good for him for trying. That is, like, the most healthiest relationship I've ever seen portrayed on TV, if we're being completely honest. It's not perfect, but it tries. And something Birdie says in the first episode actually comes back to bite her in the ass in the last episode. And it's like, he was mildly disappointed in me. And because, like, oh, that's the worst kind. Because then you can't get mad that they're mad at you. And you just have to be like, am I really this terrible of a person? But they don't want you to feel that way. So you feel bad for feeling that way. And Birdie's like, yeah. And this is just going to be the start. And this issue right here is going to grow into a huge web that's going to tear a relationship down. And it was about her giving away his sugar bowl, which had his grandma's dead ashes in it. Which was breaking his boundaries and actually did lead to them needing a break. So she was 100% right on that.
Appropriate irony? I'm not sure which one that is, but it's definitely good foreshadowing and it's good writing, which this show has just in spades.
So, do we want to talk about Dirk or do we want to move on to Did You Mean That?
I think that, let's see here. Just, I guess, a quick aside. I think Dirk works as just a good synecdoche for a thing that we kind of just talked about earlier with Tallulah, which is just like you said. Everyone's a whole person, even if we don't get. And in Dirk's case, this guy being the jerk. What you say?
He's the frat boy jerk. He's the frat boy jerk who's saying a bunch of horrible things to women. But in the later episode, he's dating the woman from HR and is working on himself personally to not say those horrible things anymore. Although how much of that is performative and how much of that is actually him wanting to change is up to viewer discretion and how you interpret his actions. And honestly, I feel like Dirk is supposed to be the in-between of the chef and Speckle. He's not as good as Speckle, but he's not as bad as the chef, and he's not as abusive as the chef. But he is definitely abusive, and what he has done is gross and wrong. Mm-hmm. But he does apologize to Tuca next time he sees her. And he does try to learn better, even though he's dating the woman from HR, which, kind of weird. Also, Tuca accidentally starts a cult because she misses Birdie. He is in the cult. His girlfriend from HR is also in the cult. They both work with Birdie at the office, and during this cult phase, they almost sacrificed Dirk, and his girlfriend says, "Sorry, my beloved, but this is for the good of the community," or whatever. And he's like, "You really don't have to kill me, though." She said, "Work is the enemy, not Dirk. Dirk is not the enemy. I have been trying." And Birdie has to save him and get him out of that situation. And we don't know if he is still with HR Lady. I'm really hoping he's not. Her last name is Lady. Her initials are literally HR Lady. So I'm not just using her job to describe her. That's literally the joke of her on the show. I swear. But we don't know what happens to their relationship, and it doesn't really matter. because I feel like this is just the first steps to seeing him become better, so he doesn't become as much of an asshole that the chef is, and be as gross and just horrible as he is.
Mm-hmm.
Who's very intentionally trying to be abusive. Or at least get off of the abuse.
Yeah, yeah. It's just good, yep.
No, I was done. I was just gonna summarize, but I feel like I already have.
Yeah. He's good summary, yeah, like all, and he's just such a great representation of just everyone's human, everyone's big and complicated. There's that sort of just weighted weird groundedness for which is odd for a show again full of bird, dog, cat, human, and plant people all wandering around in a world with jello lakes, and again, and I cannot stress this enough, a grandmother who gets baked into a cake and begs to be eaten.
Yeah, okay. Also, plant people. Coolest neighbor in the world is the next door neighbor of is across the hall neighbor of Tuca, who gets the jaguar after it leaves Tuca's place because Tuca's too irresponsible with their money. And she helps Tuca get to the place that was supposed to relax her and accidentally caused her starting the cult. And then helped her relax after the cult went horribly wrong. Because, cult. And her name is Draca, or Draca, I don't know. It's Draca, and I just love her. She's the best character. No better character than her.
Big. We stand Draca. So, which brings us, and we've been sort of discussing these big theses so far, but I think they deserve just to directly be discussed before we come into some of our later areas. Welcome to Did You Mean That? Our big category where we discuss big themes and motifs, and I've already been discussing. I see my reading of the show breaks it down into sort of two big categories connected by the motif of uplifting others. The two big ones being, like Dan Olson broke it down in his video essay, a focus on knowing your needs, and that's been a framework for a lot of my understanding of the characters and their growth. Trying to figure out what their needs are and what they need to do. You have characters like Speckles, who, just judging by his pornography interests, is a man that clearly knows what he wants. The whole joke with Speckle when they sit down to explore him and Bertie's interests sexually, when Speckles shows her the porn that he's interested in, it is literally just their sexual activity, but with a very buff blue bird, with another blue bird, and that is all that is different. That is literally all that is different.
He's clearly done the self-exploration. He learned himself back in college, and he's like, I know everything I want now. I know who I am. And Tuca and Bertie are very much not finished after college, which is totally normal and perfectly acceptable. Speckle is the outlier here, not the norm.
And even though they don't get discussed enough in their relationship because of their dynamic, he does, he knows his needs. Tuca and Bertie are learning their needs, and it's all about people growing up to realize who want to help each other and want to be helped, but don't understand what they need and what they need to know before other people can really help them, and before they can start to help themselves as well. And it's never like the show is, never like, oh, you need to figure yourself out before you can expect others to help you. It's very much from this perspective, like, no, everybody wants to, people that are close to you either should or are already trying to help you. The problem is just communicating effectively and having enough self-knowledge to do so that everybody can be helping each other effectively. I said effectively a lot there, but you get what I'm saying.
You did not communicate as efficiently as you wanted to effectively.
Yeah, so that's my big reading of half of it. And the other half is, of course, feminism and patriarchy and living as a woman and wanting to help uplift other women.
Literally how the two tie into each other, and every interaction people have at every moment, especially if you're a woman. Mm-hmm. And that includes trans women too. Like, they go through so much shit as well. Being a woman just sucks.
Yeah. And the show has so much, like, first, besides focusing on, the...
I talk about feminism a lot on this show, so I'm gonna just let Noah, go into his take on it.
Oh my goodness. Definitely, let the guy talk about the feminism. This isn't... This could go well.
I literally bring it up every other episode. I think you're good for giving it your shot, especially when it's clearly in a show that's supposed to like set it up for everybody to understand.
Yeah, and it's very good at it, and it's very frank about it, and it does, it's not interested in sugarcoating to any degree. But this isn't about very special episodes. This isn't about talking about the feminism issue or patriarchy or sexual harassment. It's like, no, this is just life. This is the world. This is dealing with the stuff that sucks, that is going to make life harder, and knowing yourself and taking care of each other harder. If if one half of the show could be said to be about knowing your needs, that'd be the half of the show that's about character relationships and external connection. The subject of feminism and patriarchy especially comes up more in the half of the show that's about people's careers and planning their future, especially Birdie, who deals with sexual harassment in her day job, in her passion like apprenticeship with the pastry chef whose name is Pastry Pete.
I don't feel like his name's worth sharing. I don't feel like his name's worth sharing or remembering. If I don't like someone, I will never remember their name. I already have a hard time with names, so if I don't feel like you're worth my time, it's never gonna stick. I've already forgotten it again.
That's a fair system. That is a fair system to have.
If I don't like you, you're not worth my time. I'm not gonna give my emotion, and I'm not going to give my emotional time or values over thinking about you.
Yeah. The biggest the show isn't really about systemic analysis because this is a show about personal relationships, but whenever systemic problems come up, they are very specifically problems that affect women, because this is a show where the question of women trying to help each other and uplift women and deal with men in the workplace, and a workplace environment that is designed for men, and for men to be comfortable in, and women to not be comfortable in, and dealing with that. There are different elements that, there are, like we said, Tallulah, who does not care about the other women, barely cares about other people, really. She got hers, and that's all that matters to her. And you have, Tuca, when she comes in to help Birdie, who quickly adapts to the workplace and gets by just simply by just being so loud and performative, and not being frank, being honest and sensitive, and being able to play and joke sexually with the boss in ways that Birdie just wouldn't feel comfortable with, in ways that just add other weird barriers that aren't explicitly gendered per se, but definitely are still restrictive based on your relationship with sex and sexuality.
And I want to play into, even though Birdie and Tuca approach every situation differently, neither of them are inherently wrong for approaching the situation that way. Tuca makes it clear she does not mind the sex jokes with the other employees, especially the male ones. And she has made her boundaries clear. She does not mind that. At least performatively, she does not mind that. She never says outside of that performance that she doesn't mind it. What she does mind is when people do it to Tuca, and when people have done it to Birdie, and Birdie makes it clear she's not comfortable, or when they do it to the other women in the office, and she stands up for them too when they're not comfortable with it. Just because you can make those jokes with her does not mean you can make those jokes with everyone. And the show's like, that's a perfectly the show makes it clear that it's entirely appropriate to approach these situations in different ways, because every woman is different, every person's different, and there's not one go-to answer for any of these difficult situations, but it does provide general responses that help the main characters get through them, and I believe could help a lot of people who go through these issues day to day get through them too. While their answers won't work in every situation, a lot of it falls onto just relying on a friend or a partner who's there for you. And I feel like everybody needs at least one. They definitely need, like, more than one friend, but, like, at least one they can talk to about this shit. Different friends you can talk to about different stuff. Human relationships are complicated and varied and just very, very difficult to navigate.
There's so many wonderful warm moments of that in this show too, and that's why it doesn't feel like, despite all the horrible and the big painful emotions the show goes into, it doesn't feel like a big drain. Like a lot of shows that go into stuff can feel like a drain, because this show has a lot of genuine lighthearted moments of connection that still, understand the complexity of the relationship, but still let you have these genuine moments of people caring for each other. Speckle and Bertie, when at the end of the episode where Speckle and Bertie are figuring out their sexuality and they're reapproaching their sexual relationship, he sets up an elaborate
he sets up an
BBC
elaborate roleplay fantasy that's based on her favorite time
British
drama.
Bodice Ripper roleplay with her, and it's hilarious, and it's sexy in a wholesome way, and it's just a lovely scene. And of course, the brightest moment in the entire one of the biggest brightest moments in the whole series is at the end of episode 9, when after Bertie has kind of gone through and re-examined this, a lot of trauma that she's dealt with, she's like sitting on a beach with like a former coach of hers and her coach's wife, who is just the coach and her wife are like there to show you, hey, the answer is women uplifting and taking care of women and each other's needs. That's the answer, kids. And there's this whole beach party where they're just sitting each other with a giant crab who's also who's also a woman who's here to be supportive. And Tuca's there and Bertie's there, and they're all around the campfire, and they're all empathetic and taking care of each other. And it's this sort of bright moment where it's like, hey, all those big nasty problems outside of this like lake and this island and this beach, they get, the answer is here. The answer is women taking care of each other and people who love each other taking care of each other.
And 2 last things. One of the jokes I did appreciate in the show was actually between the coach and her wife about how, remember when we used to fight like that and how we always laughed about it after. And then immediately her wife is the one who made the joke. And then immediately she's like, I'm lying. That stuff stressed me out. It was horrible. She's like, we're past that. We're past that. But also, the coach is voiced by Jane Lynch, who... Come on. People should know who Jane Lynch is. Alright? Oh, I feel like it's very...
Sam Puckett's mom, right?
Yeah. I was thinking more of, like, from Glee. But yeah that too. She's also Calhoun in Wreck-It Ralph, so there's 3 things she's been in right off the top of my head.
Female icons, one and all. Really. Yes. The full gamut of strong female characters right there.
Yeah.
We stand Calhoun in this household.
But I really appreciated that joke where, like, you know how most shows make comedy jokes like this and we're supposed to take it funny, like, ha ha ha. Yelling is normal and totally not upsetting. This show's like, here's that joke, fuck that joke. And I did like that one.
Yeah. It's very like, no, it's not funny. It's not romantic. Arguments suck. They're stressful.
This is
Don't be in
horrible. Them. Okay, so
watch episode. You can't just dive into episode 9 because
there's have to so much
to counteract the other stuff. But like, the bright stuff in that episode is really bright. One of my favorite lines in that whole one is the one that I think just captures the whole series ethos, its message to the individual people watching it. It's when the coach's wife, whose name escapes me,
I think it's Meredith. No, wait, Meredith is the coach.
Meredith.
It's she's an owl. No. She's an owl, and it's a joke about what kind of owl she is, I think, but I don't know. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Joke, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't know it off the top of my head. I don't even remember the main character's name sometimes.
Her name is Pat.
Okay. I did not remember that.
By Isabella Rossellini, who has this great line where she's talking about her hobby, which is making really beautiful, what's the word?
It's not crochet eggs, right? Creche eggs? Creche?
No.
Creche?
I'm not sure. Maybe.
They're broken eggs that she sets up.
Dioramas and eggs.
It's basically ships and glass bottles, but different settings and scenes she makes and puts in broken eggs.
Yeah, and she has this wonderful line where she's explaining these to Tuca, which is very clearly one of those, the writers wanted to put the theme into words just so you would, have it there. And she just says, broken things can become beautiful with a little patience. And it's like, oh, you mean people and how we're all kind of broken? And if we just all are patient with ourselves and each other, we can we can be beautiful.
I think
Oh,
what
I'm not crying.
I think what really sells that whole theme of that episode and like them putting the lesson into words is when Tuca makes hers under 30 seconds and she's so proud of it and she's happy with it, and Pat responds with, "It took me years before I was okay with how one of mine looked." It's good that you did it so quickly. Good job. And she's very clearly like upset because by her standards that would not look good, but Tuca's proud of it, and as long as Tuca's proud of it, then it's good enough.
Yeah,
but
it's so good. Watch the show.
We've talked about cast a little bit, and in our last few minutes here, I do want to talk about the lead actresses in the show.
Yes, please do.
So Allie Wong is played Birdie is played by Allie Wong. Fuck my life. Oh my god. She's an American comedian. She literally has stand-up on Netflix. That's how I actually found out about Allie Wong outside of her movies. I watched her stand-up, and it was just hilarious. And then I marathoned like a bunch of her movies that she's been in. Baby Cobra is what one of the two stand-ups are, and they're just hilarious. She's also in like Always Be My Maybe, which came out in 2019, and that was really good. I feel like she's a phenomenal actress and an amazing comedian, and I have nothing but like glowing words to say to her. And I could not tell it was her playing Birdie. It did not sound like her.
She vanishes into that character.
And like I've heard her do other voices before. She does them in her skits and like on other TV shows. But like, oh man, I did not realize that was her. And like Tiffy Haddish plays Tuca, and I love Tiffany Haddish. She's also an amazing comedian. I watch a lot of stand-up comedy. I love these two's acts, which is why I'm shocked I like didn't like a lot of the comedy in the show, because I love their comedy routines and their stand-up, but not everything hits with everybody. Tiffy Haddish also just won a Grammy Award, so you know, good for her. I don't watch the Grammys. I don't care about them, but I'm happy for her. She deserved it.
I need to see if I can't find a copy of that album for something called Black Mitzvah. Oh, nope. For Black Mitzvah, a comedy album she released. I need to find that now. I need to get my hands on that. That sounds hilarious. I need to like I want to hear more of her work. I'm looking at her, and she like got a Emmy for hosting SNL. She stars in The Last OG. I've not heard of any of her work, and now I'm like, oh, you're hilarious. I've got to get more of this.
You've never heard of Kids Say the Darndest Things? That's like the TV series she's been doing for, I think, like, at least the last year, if not the last two or more years.
I haven't heard of it.
I
didn't catch that.
I've caught a lot of
Queen Whatever Wannabe in the Lego Movie too. Okay, I know that.
I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the movies she's in, which have like a lot of black actors, main cast, I've watched with my stepfather who is black, so I've known about her for a long time because I would sit down and marathon comedy skits with him. That's how I learned about Dave Chappelle and the Kings of Comedy, like Mac and Cedric. Like Cedric the King and like all of them I learned from him, and so I've just been watching them since I was like a young kid. And I love her stuff.
And of course, Steven Yeun as Speckle.
Yeah.
Glenn is Speckle.
He sounds the same way he sounds in every voice acting job he does. I gotta say, the one character he plays who I feel like sounds the most distant from him is when he plays Steven Steve Palchuk in Tales of Arcadia series. I feel like that character sounds the most different from all of those other characters, and even then, it takes 2 series before it gets there in that final one.
Oh man, he was an Oksha? I need to watch that at some point. Talk about messed up. Oh man. Oh man. I need to look at more of his stuff. Oh yes, of course you. Yep, that I see it. I see it now. I see why he pops up in stuff that you've watched a lot of.
I have watched a lot of all 3 of these actors and actresses stuff my entire life. I love their work. That's part of what made watching the series easier for me. I'm not gonna lie, hearing their voices and being like, ah, yes, this is so cool now.
Man.
Also,
so and of course there's the series creator Lisa Hannawalt, who was like production designer and a producer of BoJack Horseman, a series that I haven't heard of, but as I understand it, is not easy to get through.
Oh, it's so depressing.
Will drain you.
It is. I love Supernatural, but it is. No, not fuck. Fuck. Supernatural's also hard to get through and really draining emotionally. BoJack Horseman is also super depressing and really hard to get through emotionally, unless you are prepared for, like, re-examining your life choices and the way you approach, like, trauma in your past and depression and a lot. There's a lot that goes on with that whole show. It's just a lot. I loved it, but it's a lot.
This is her show, and she sort of, her name's up on the everything. She gets creator credits, and this of course makes it the very rare, like I said, adult animated show, created and led by women, even if not all the directors are women. But
it shows. It shows. I have never watched a series that is able to tackle these issues so honestly and not make me feel shitty coming out of it. And like seeing how like Tig Notaro was a part of it as well. Mm-hmm. And like she's another comedian I've grown up listening to. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
That's just like just amazing.
So, and of course her like, and of course Haddish's like experience, not Haddish, Hannawalt's experience as a cartoonist shows so much in just the design of the show and its eclectic nonsense that just screams, I read too many comics as a child. That's comics with an X, by the way. Oh, it's so. It's all, and of course, being a show led by women and for the niche audience of half of the human population, it got canceled after 1 season by Netflix.
But hey, it's coming back for season 2 on Adult Swim. I'm surprised Netflix let this one go. Like, I'm really surprised. This seems like right up Netflix's alley.
It definitely does, and it doesn't seem like it would, like, I know animation isn't cheap, but we're talking like, 10, 30-minute episodes for a comedy show that is really well critically received and is just genuinely really good. And for crying out loud, Big Mouth is still going on.
Big Mouth is a whole nother conversation. I don't like the comedy in that show either, but I do feel like it has some good messages for kids. It's just none of the messages are delivered as well as they are in like Sex Education, which is also on Netflix, and I would recommend. It's not as dirty as it sounds. It's literally just about sex education and like kids trying to teach each other it versus learning from a professional what is sex education and the conversations that make people uncomfortable. It's really good.
Nice. I mean, it makes sense why Adult Swim would be the one picking this up because, outside of like, honestly, I think that they're the only place that I can think of where you can put television animation or television comedy that is trying to do weird experimental stuff, because it's Adult Swim, and that's where you put the stuff that nobody expects to be seen. And then it's going to be excellent and great and go on and do excellent, cool, and great things. Or vanish into the ether at midnight.
So, let's get to the conclusion here.
Mm-hmm.
Upon rewatching the series, have any of your thoughts on it changed? What did you think about the first time watching it versus the second time watching it?
Let's see here. I just a greater and more profound appreciation for the writing here, for the strength and depth of these characters. They're not just like characters that are two-dimensional. These people are like fully 3- and 4-dimensional. They have complexity and a fantastic combination of ambiguity that comes with being a person and just not understanding your own experiences, and also going on paths of understanding and trying to carve a bit of that ambiguity away and begin to understand a bit more of why they feel the things they feel, and at the same time still living in this world where there's still a lot of uncertainty internally and externally. And I just fell in love with that. Also realizing that Tuca is a bi disaster. Excellent. Very excited to notice that, a thing that I didn't notice before.
I had noticed her flirting with other women, but I wasn't sure if that was just her being performative again and being loud and trying to get attention, or if she was actually like bi or pan, until she reunites with the coach and she clearly wants to sleep with the coach. She clearly wants to sleep with Meredith. She's like, I'm a grown woman now, it totally won't be weird. And everyone's like, it still totally would be weird.
Pat is living my ideal life. She gets to kiss Meredith.
It's just, it's a whole thing.
It's so much. It's so bizarre and excellent. It's just we big fan of her. Big fan. So that sort of is a good summary of a lot of my experiences just on the rewatch. Is just a greater appreciation of the depth of where this series goes, of the value of it as just like a piece of art about being a human. I walked away with a feeling like, no, this is a really good show. Like, really good, will stand the test of time, or, well, it's for women, so it'll probably be forgotten within a generation. But hey,
that's not always true. Women share things with other women, especially those of a younger generation, so that they can learn lessons to protect themselves. It's how, like, the keychain method of protecting yourself gets around, which, by the way, you don't want to put it right in between your fingers, because then it goes back and stabs you. You want to put it right here, in between your thumb and your fingers. That's a common misconception that gets around about self-protection. This won't hurt you. This will.
Putting it, and can you describe that verbally for the listeners?
Okay, so basically, if you the keychain method of self-defense, which I'm sure most of the women in the audience already know this, it's when you take a keychain, you take your keys and you put a different key in between each finger. That way, if they come at you, you can punch someone with your keys and stab them, and like get a second to run away. But if you put them right in between your fingers, once you hit, the key's gonna go back and cut your hand just as likely as it is to hurt your assailant. So what you want to do, instead of putting a different key between each finger, you want to put either sticking out between your hand and your finger and your thumb. That way you can stab up, or putting it face down in your palm, coming out with your pinky finger wrapped around it. That way you can stab down. You don't want to do it in between your fingers, because that will cut your hand.
Think of it more like a shiv, less like Wolverine.
Basically, that's the whole thing about it.
Groovy. Take that one, put that in the bank. And so that brings me to my question to you. As the newbie, as having gotten to watch this the first time, and having had a diversity of responses to different elements of it, what is your kind of net review? What do you feel about it?
I overall love it. I feel like the characters make up for the jokes that feel like a hit or a miss on me. I feel like the music, especially how it's used in the Aunt Tallulah scene, where it goes from kind of seeming like a playful, healthy relationship to the music shifts down the moment Tuca seems to stop having fun and how it gets darker as the situation grows more serious. That was on point. The character dynamics with each other were on point. It never felt like to me anybody ever forgot someone else existed, except for Speckle sometimes. And that was just because they forget he has emotional needs too. It's not because they forgot he ever was there. And I love that in the series. If your series has good characters and good characters interactions, you're probably gonna sell me on it. And honestly, this one sells me on it. Even if I don't like all the jokes in it, even if like some of the weird bizarro stuff that happening isn't my cup of tea. The one thing I really hope gets explored in season 2, and I know we're going over a little bit, so I'll make this quick, is I was unsure if some of the stuff happening in the world was because the characters of Tuca and Bertie are unreliable narrators, or if they were actually happening. Like, I was unsure if, like, the boob popping out of Bertie's chest was something that actually happened, or if her anxiety made her feel like that was basically what happened, and then she imagined scenarios of people pointing at it for the rest of the day until finally her boob comes back with her self-confidence. There's a lot of instances like that throughout the series where I don't know if it's unreliable narrative or magical realism at play. And I would love to, like, dissect more of that in season 2. I cannot wait for that. I will be continuing the series, even if all the jokes don't hit me.
Like, I mentioned this earlier, but what I really would like to see in season 2, or at least I hinted at, I want to see Tuca's family. So, a big part of going on and continuing a show like this is, of course, introducing new characters and bringing in other people that are already a part of these characters' lives that we just haven't had a chance to see personally yet. I would really like to see Tuca's siblings certainly specifically come up, but also, like we talked about, see maybe Tallulah and anybody that might have been in Tallulah's life that really lasted. Not that any of her husbands ever lasted, but surely there must be somebody else kind of in her life that would have also been in Tuca's life that is worth, meeting and finding out and listening to and seeing how they factor into the complex 4-dimensional form that Tuca is today.
Besides her mother, because we already know her mother kept up a relationship with her sister, she just didn't rely on her sister the same way Tuca does.
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting to see their parents or friendships or anything, really.
Stick around for a follow-up in a year or two.
When the series comes out and we can watch it.
Yeah. We can watch. Hey, and you can watch it too. My goodness, if you're listening now, keep an eye out for it and watch. Check it out.
Give Netflix a try, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's or get unscrupulous about it if you don't want to support the people that canceled it, or don't. We're not suggesting you do anything unscrupulous.
Anyways, that's a great note to end it on. This is a show I would definitely recommend. Even if not all the elements are for you, it's definitely worth a watch. And if you don't come away feeling better, you're at least going to come away having learned something new. Most likely. So, for now, this is Tiger Eyes 35 and Noah. And this is our first episode back.
And it is good to be back after a month and a half. I think that we're getting this figured out. Thank you. Hey, if you've been listening, I know that there are those of you out there that have been listening, and I do appreciate you being out there. We do. It's good to know people are listening. And thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've enjoyed us. And I am glad to say that you have finally caught Tuca and Bertie.
Thank you for watching the video. If you liked our discussions on Tuca and Bertie, please subscribe to support our channel. Likes are wonderful and greatly appreciated too. If you want to see these episodes get made before they go up on YouTube, you can find links to our Twitch channels in the description below. We record the episode on both channels at 9 p.m. EST on Tuesday nights. So, what did you guys think of Tuca and Bertie? Is it magical realism or surrealism?